What's up, gang? So we're doing a little mini series uh, on different factors of health. So we tend to think of 5 factors of health, and those being nutrition, fitness recovery, sleep, mindset, and relationships. I have been gifted the topic of sleep. So over my next several episodes, we're going to talk about different things that affect sleep and everything and anything sleep related. So today I want to talk about some why sleep is important, why we focus on sleep, and then a really high level view of some science that goes into some of the sleep related stuff. So let's talk about the good and the bad of sleep. So um, the bad being lack of sleep. So why is lack of sleep bad? This is a stat. 2/3 of adults throughout all developed nations fail to obtain the recommended 8 hours of nightly sleep. So you're probably the next question is so what, right? So what's the big deal? Why is sleep one of the 5 factors of health? Why is 8 hours of sleep important? 5 Alarm tends to recommend 7+ hours of sleep. I think the key thing to remember there is that it's not just being in bed for 7+ hours. It's being asleep for 7+ hours. So that's definitely a difference, and a bigger difference for some than others, but definitely a difference. So here's some facts relating to lack of sleep. So if you regularly get less than 6 to 7 hours of sleep, 6 to 7 hours of sleep is a lot for some people. I think there's probably a lot of us in general who um, live our lives with less than 6 hours of sleep. So here's why it's important to try and get 6 to 7+ hours of sleep. Getting less than that wrecks your immune system and doubles your risk of developing some types of cancer, increases your likelihood for developing Alzheimer's, disrupts blood sugar regulation to the point of being pre-diabetic. There's a really good study on that where they take fully healthy people, deprive them of sleep, and it doesn't take long. In a matter of days, they go from being healthy, normal blood sugar regulation to literally being pre-diabetic. And when they're finally able to catch up and get some good quality sleep, it reverses very quickly and with no deficit or anything else. So it definitely affects that, and you can see how, if you know anything about nutrition, how blood sugar can regulate, how blood sugar is regulated to your nutrition and your overall health with all that stuff. Then that's obviously important. So lack of sleep increases the likelihood of developing cardiovascular disease, stroke, and congestive heart failure. It contributes in no small way to depression, anxiety, and suicidality. And then I made a side note because I think weight is a big issue that, for better or for worse, we as a society focus on. A lack of appropriate sleep increases feelings of hunger and decreases feelings of satiation. If you've ever pulled an all-nighter and gotten the munchies and stuff like that, irregardless of alcohol consumption, the longer you're awake, the munchier you'll kind of get. That's a real thing. So what else? The World Health Organization has declared a sleep loss epidemic throughout industrialized nations. Countries where sleep has declined the most rapidly, such as the US, UK, Japan, and several Western European countries, are also those suffering the greatest increase in the rates of the aforementioned physical diseases and mental disorders. Um, it's just that's correlation, if not causation. So everything, sleep is not the sole determinant for disease, right? But it is highly correlated and potentially a severe cause of many of those, one of many of the causes of some of that stuff. So um, I think it's weird that lack of sleep is not a disease itself, but the World Health Organization has declared lack of sleep an epidemic. So um, diseases can cause irregular sleep or lack of quality sleep or lack of sleep in general. Um, but I think it's crazy that the lack of sleep itself is what was declared an epidemic. So get your quality sleep. Here's what good sleep does for your brain. Improves your ability to learn, memorize, and make logical decisions, calibrates our emotional circuits, allowing us to navigate social and psychological challenges better, improves creativity, whole slew of stuff. If you or yourself have ever either been around or been an individual who's suffered from lack of sleep, um, You know how kind of like cranky you can get, or they can get, how much shorter their fuses might be, how they uh, aren't as clear, crisp with their social interactions and things like that. So Leah can vouch for that. She sees it on a regular basis through yours truly. So yeah, and then aside from like some of the stuff that it helps do in your brain, as far as your body goes, improves immune function. This is all good quality and quantity of sleep. Improves immune function, fighting malignancy, preventing infection, warding off sickness. I think that's super important. Reforms your metabolism by fine-tuning the balance of insulin and circulating glucose. Um, regulates appetite, right? That all goes into some other chronic disease style issues. Helps maintain a flourishing gut microbiome. We won't go into that in any of my videos, but gut health has gotten a lot of publicity in the last couple of years and its effect in overall health and wellness. Lowers blood pressure and assists in heart health and a whole bunch of other stuff. So sleep is important, right? Not just for keeping us or bodily and physically healthy, but also in keeping us mentally healthy and as well as brain function. So a lot of health and wellness experts are saying that sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health every day. So the vast majority of people sleep every day, for better, for worse, or not for better, for worse. They sleep every day, regardless of quality or quantity. They're getting some, right? So most people are even going as far as to say that the physical and mental impairments caused by even one night of bad sleep dwarf any caused by an equivalent absence of food or exercise. So if you had to choose between those three things, like sleep, food, and exercise, and you had to miss one, you would be better off to not miss sleep, right? It would do more for you and your overall health to get the night of sleep than it would to get a healthy meal or to get a single dose of exercise or anything like that. So I don't disagree. From my experience, for whatever that's worth. So all right, let's get into a little science. So because some of this will come back around to being relevant in maybe some later videos. So two factors determine when we want to be asleep and when we want to be awake. So those being circadian rhythm, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, and adenosine buildup, also known as sleep pressure. So the balance between these two kind of dictate how alert and attentive you are during the day, and then when you'll feel tired and ready for bed, and in part how well you'll sleep. So we're going to talk about each one of these separately and then kind of bring something back together. So circadian rhythm, most of you again have probably heard of this. It's everybody's like internal clock for day, night, when they sleep and things like that, right? It is not 100% in line with day and night. It's close, but it's not 100% in line with daytime, nighttime. The biggest thing that I found really interesting as far as circadian rhythm goes is that every individual's circadian rhythm is slightly different. And by that, I mean it's offset. So everybody's heard of the terms like morning person or night owl or whatever. Those aren't just like societal things where like I choose to be that way for whatever reason. It's to a certain, I mean, you might, but if you don't feel good doing it, it's likely because your circadian rhythm isn't in line with what you're choosing to put your body through. So, morning people, their circadian rhythm is set that way, right? They operate better. They wake up early, and their circadian rhythm peaks early. And then as their circadian rhythm drops back down, they want to go to bed at an earlier time and still get their good quality and quantity full night's sleep. Night owls tend to peak later in the day, so if all things being equal, if they're able to, they'll sleep later and not wake up till maybe 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and that's when they feel their best. So, um, statistics I found said that about 40% of Gen Pop are morning people naturally, whether they choose to be or not. Um, about 30% are night owls, and the other 30% of the population is kind of somewhere in that gray area in between. Um, the downside to this is that society in general favors morning people, and to a lesser extent, the middle people, because of work schedules and waking up at an early time and things like that. If you're a night person and your circadian rhythm is set that you're not supposed to wake up, even if it's semi-early, even if you're not supposed to wake up until 8 o'clock, because your circadian rhythm is going to peak and you're going to be at your most productive, in that 10 to 2 range or something like that, then if you've got a normal job and you have to wake up at 6, you're offsetting it. And then as your circadian rhythm comes down, it's going to come down later. So if you're a night person, you probably have a hard time falling asleep early. So you might lay in bed for a while, and therefore and then if you have to wake up early again, you're getting less quantity and likely less quality of sleep and things like that. So standard societal rules do not benefit night owls. So yeah, that's a thing. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk more about that later, and what you can do if you're a night owl. So the second thing that determines whether or not your body wants to be asleep or awake is that adenosine buildup or sleep pressure. So your brain has receptors called adenosine receptors in it. Every single second that you're awake, adenosine attaches to these adenosine receptors and slowly builds up and up and up and up and up in the brain. So as the level of adenosine rises, adenosine goes up, your brain and body tend to turn up the volume of things that make your body want to go to sleep. And they turn down the volume of things that make your body want to be awake. So the higher the adenosine, the more everything wants to go to sleep, and the less everything wants to be awake. So fun side note, caffeine works because it is an adenosine receptor. It attaches to those adenosine receptors. It blocks the ability of adenosine to attach to your brain. So we'll talk about caffeine later, though. So, all right. So, again, you might think that these two things, circadian rhythm and adenosine buildup, are correlated. That they work in conjunction to make you want to sleep and be awake, etc. So, in fact, they while they're usually aligned side by side, they function and operate independently. So, here's how that works. I'm going to show you a couple graphs of a circadian rhythm line and an adenosine buildup line. And you'll see how they're kind of related, and we'll talk about what happens, and we'll go over an example of how they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily function together. So, okay, let's do, I'm going to move off to the side. Snap. So here's my two charts. So on the top chart, you can see your circadian rhythm line ticking along, and then adenosine buildup is that shark fin type looking thing, right? So it rises as you're awake, and then as your circadian rhythm starts to slow down, you fall asleep, adenosine buildup drops off sharply. And at the exact time it's zeroing out, your circadian rhythm is coming back up, not online, it's coming back up, and they work side by side in a normal environment and a normal function to regulate your sleep. However, again, they don't function together, they're just normally aligned. So on the second one, the bottom chart, let's take the example of if you pull an all-nighter. For whatever reason, you got to pull an all-nighter. So you don't sleep. Your circadian rhythm ticks along whether you sleep or not. And regardless of where you fall in that morning person, night owl range, your circadian rhythm keeps ticking along, again, whether you sleep or not. Now, adenosine buildup is only drained out if you sleep. So on the second chart, you can see adenosine buildup keeps rising and rising and rising. The urge and the desire that your body has to sleep is directly related to the distance between those two lines, your circadian rhythm and adenosine buildup. So when your circadian rhythm line is in a valley and your adenosine buildup is high, the distance between those lines is high, your body really, really wants to go to sleep. So you pull an all-nighter, you stay awake. Adenosine buildup never drops off. It keeps going up, but your circadian rhythm does drop. You don't sleep, you stay awake, your circadian rhythm jumps back up. So the distance between those lines gets bigger as you pull your all-nighter, and then even though adenosine buildup stays high, your circadian rhythm re-rises. Re-rises? Anyway. So if you've ever pulled an all-nighter and you felt like you've gotten like a second wind type thing, whether that's in the morning, early afternoon, or somewhere around there, that's why. Because the distance between those two lines has actually gotten shorter even though you've never slept. Then, when your circadian rhythm starts to drop back off, the distance between those two lines gets even greater. So it's really hard to make it through any subsequent nights or anything like that. You just crash. So sleep debt is a real thing. It's not on a one-to-one basis, but if you've ever pulled an all-nighter and then not slept until the following night, there's a good chance that you're probably going to sleep longer than the normal amount of time. If you're normally 8 hours, you're probably in that 10-plus range, and things like that. So anyway, I found that really, really interesting. I hope you did too. Yeah. So if you have any questions on that, hit me up, and I can try and maybe address them again or be more specific. But some of that stuff's going to come into play later on, like the adenosine receptors and stuff like that. So yeah. So that's all I got for today. So if I hope you found it interesting. I hope I've expressed upon you the importance of sleep and why it's important. And we'll talk in later episodes about what we can best do to maximize our quantity and quality of sleep and things like that. So if you have any specific questions that are sleep related, send them to me, email them to me at josh@fivealarmcrossfit.com, and I'll be sure to try and answer those in later episodes. And I think that's it, okay? All right, I look forward to it, and I'll see you guys in episode 2.